A 4-year-old girl, practically skin and bones, witnesses a millionaire getting burned with a hot spoon by the enraged husband of a woman he kissed. But then she steps forward and does something that leaves everyone speechless. Drop a rating from 0 to 10 and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your feedback means the world to me. The screams sliced through the stuffy afternoon air in Charleston like a razor, echoing off the cobblestone streets at precisely 3 p.m. Braxton Hayes, the 30-year-old millionaire entrepreneur with his movie star looks and imposing build, nearly spilled his coffee as he backed away from the window of his luxury condo. It was always at the same time, always with the same desperate intensity. For the past 3 weeks, that sound had been coming from the old colonial house across the street, a faded yellow 2-story building with peeling blue shutters that clashed sharply with the sleek, modern building where he lived. His fortune, amassed through savvy stock market investments, had bought him this refuge in the historic district, but the tranquility he sought was constantly being shattered. "Probably just a kid throwing a tantrum," he muttered to himself, straightening his tie before returning to his work. As the owner of one of the largest construction firms in the region, he was used to solving complex problems, but he preferred to steer clear of other people's dramas. Especially after 5 years of living alone, ever since he lost his wife on a rainy night, he'd rather forget. Across the street, inside the colonial house, the 4-year-old girl, who looked barely 2 due to her extreme frailty, huddled in the corner of the kitchen. Her few years of life hadn't been enough for her to understand why her aunt resented her so much. The 38-year-old woman gripped a metal spoon she'd heated on the gas stove, her eyes, bloodshot from alcohol, fixed on the child trembling before her. "You're a curse on this house," the aunt hissed, her voice slurred from the liquor she'd been drinking since noon at the local dive bar, O'Malley's. "Because of you, my sister is gone. Because of you, I lost everything." The spoon came down hard on the girl's small arm, leaving a red mark that joined the other scars dotting her thin limbs. The child bit her lip to stifle a louder scream. She'd learned that screaming only enraged her aunt more, a former City Hall worker who'd been fired for excessive absences caused by her addiction. The girl closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's soft voice, singing that lullaby before bedtime. It was all that was left of her now, fragments of memories and a melody that insisted on echoing in her mind during the most painful moments. "Stop your snivelling," the aunt grunted, putting the spoon back in the drawer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Go to your room, and I don't want to see you until tomorrow. And if you get charcoal on the walls again, you'll see what real punishment is." The girl ran to the small room at the back of the house, a stuffy space with an old bed and a crucifix on the wall. There, she curled up under the thin sheet and began to hum her mother's lullaby softly, the only thing that still comforted her. She didn't know that, across the street, someone had finally paid attention to that melody. The millionaire stopped reviewing the contracts when he heard the faint but distinct sound. He knew that song. His late wife used to sing it while cooking, a popular old tune about free birds. But where was it coming from? He went to the window again, his eyes scanning the facade of the colonial house. One of the back windows was slightly open, and from there came that childish voice, trembling but persistent. For the first time in 3 weeks, he felt something other than simple annoyance. There was something in that voice that touched a sensitive chord in his chest, something that reminded him of responsibilities long buried under layers of work and isolation. Next door to the colonial house, the 61-year-old retired schoolteacher, Mrs. Abernathy, was watering her begonias when she heard the girl singing. Unlike the businessman, she could no longer ignore the signs. During her 40 years teaching elementary school, she'd developed a sixth sense for children in distress, and that voice carried a pain that made her heart ache. That's strange, she thought, watching the windows of the house, a family she'd known for decades. The aunt had always been troubled, but since she took custody of her orphaned niece, something had shifted in the atmosphere of that house. The girl never played in the yard, never ran through the streets like the other children in the historic district. The teacher dried her hands on her apron and made a decision. The next morning, she would pay a courtesy visit to her neighbor. It had been a long time since she'd properly talked to the aunt, and perhaps it was time to get to know the little girl better. The sun began to set over the mountains surrounding Charleston as the girl finally fell asleep, exhausted by pain and fear. Her small fingers gripped the sheet, and in her dreams, she flew like the birds she secretly drew on the kitchen walls with pieces of charcoal found in the yard. Across the street, the millionaire closed the curtains and tried to go back to work, but he couldn't concentrate. His dollar account and financial investments meant nothing in the face of that disturbing sound echoing in his mind. Something had changed that afternoon, something he didn't yet fully understand. For the first time in years, he felt that maybe it was time to pay attention to what was happening beyond his own windows. Night fell over Charleston, but the echo of that children's song continued to resonate in the mind of a man who had spent 5 years running from his responsibilities, and a retired teacher who had never been able to ignore the suffering of a child. The next morning brought with it the aroma of fresh bread from the local bakeries and the typical movement of the historic district awakening to another day. The retired teacher wore her best floral dress and combed her grey hair with extra care. There was something in that child's voice that wouldn't leave her alone, an echo of hopelessness she recognized from her years as an educator. At 9 o'clock sharp, she knocked on the door of the colonial house. The sound echoed through the silent interior until shuffling footsteps approached. The aunt opened the door with a swollen face and red eyes, clearly suffering the effects of her previous night's drinking. "Good morning," the teacher said with her gentlest smile. "I've come to pay a courtesy visit. It's been so long since we properly talked." The aunt hesitated, running her hand through her disheveled hair. "Oh, Mrs. Abernathy, It's not a good time. The house is a mess." "Nonsense, dear. We've been neighbors for so long." The teacher took a step forward, forcing the aunt to step back. "And I would really like to meet your niece. I hear she's an adorable girl." The aunt's face hardened for a moment before forcing a weak smile. "The girl is sick. High fever. Best not to get too close." At that moment, a soft noise came from the kitchen, the sound of something being dragged across the floor. The teacher pricked up her ears, immediately recognizing the sound of a child trying to move silently. "Perhaps I can help," insisted the educator. "I have experience with sick children. Raised 3 myself, you know how it is." "No need, no," the aunt responded quickly, blocking the entrance with her body. "I already took her to the doctor. It's just a cold. She'll get over it soon." The teacher noticed the aunt's nervous hands, the way she avoided eye contact, and especially the strong smell of alcohol emanating from her even at such an early hour. All the signs she had learned to recognize during decades dealing with troubled families. Across the street, the millionaire watched the scene from his window while eating breakfast. He had woken up earlier than usual, disturbed by confusing dreams where the voice of a child mingled with memories of his late wife. When he saw Mrs. Abernathy at the door of the colonial house, a strange curiosity washed over him. The educator finally said goodbye to the aunt, but not without casting an inquisitive look inside the house. There was something deeply wrong there, and her experience told her that a child was suffering. As she walked back to her house, she decided that she needed to find a way to verify her suspicions. Inside the colonial house, the aunt slammed the door shut and went to the kitchen, where she found the girl crouching behind the table, trying to hide. The child had tried to reach a glass of water from the sink, but her height didn't allow it, and she had knocked over a chair in the process. "Didn't I tell you to stay in your room?" the aunt snarled, her irritation intensified by her hangover and the unexpected visit. "I was thirsty," the girl murmured, her big eyes fixed on the floor. Thirsty. The aunt laughed bitterly. You want water? Then go get it in the yard. And since you like making so much noise, you can stay out there until I decide you can come in. The girl went out to the small backyard, a space surrounded by high walls and dominated by a single magnolia tree. There she sat on the ground and began to draw with a piece of charcoal she had found near the stove. It was always birds, small, large, some flying, others perched on imaginary branches. Each stroke represented her dream of freedom, of flying away from that house where pain was her only constant companion. The hours passed slowly. The aunt had locked the back door, leaving the girl in the yard under the hot midday sun. The child began to feel dizzy, but knew that knocking on the door would only result in more punishment. So she began to hum her mother's lullaby softly, the melody being her only source of comfort. It was this melody that reached the millionaire's ears again. This time he couldn't ignore it. There was something too familiar about that voice, that specific song. He picked up his cell phone and, almost without thinking, began to record. He didn't know exactly why, but an instinct told him that he might need that evidence. As he recorded, fragments of memories began to fit together in his mind. His former employee hummed that same song while working. A woman who had been an exemplary employee until she disappeared abruptly. A woman who always spoke fondly about her little daughter, a girl with a familiar name. It can't be, muttered the millionaire, his cell phone trembling in his hands. The realization hit him like a punch in the stomach. The child suffering in the house across the street was the daughter of his former employee, the kind woman who had worked for him for 3 years before simply disappearing. How hadn't he made that connection before? The businessman put away his cell phone and began to pace back and forth in his apartment. He vaguely remembered his former employee mentioning family problems, a sister she didn't get along with, financial difficulties, but he was so absorbed in his own problems at the time, the growing conflicts with his wife, the problems at the company, that he hadn't paid due attention. Now 5 years later, his ex-employee's daughter was across the street, and from the sounds coming from that house, she wasn't in a good situation. The guilt he carried for the loss of his wife multiplied, now including the regret for not having helped when she clearly needed it. At 3 o'clock punctually, the screams started again. This time, the millionaire didn't move away from the window. He watched with growing horror as, through the kitchen window of the colonial house, he saw a female silhouette moving aggressively. He picked up his cell phone again and began to record, this time with more determination. What he saw through the cell phone screen made him nauseous. The aunt was holding something in her hands. It seemed to be a kitchen utensil, and gesturing violently in the direction of a small figure that he could barely distinguish. The girl's screams echoed through the afternoon, and this time the businessman couldn't pretend that they were just childish tantrums. When the silence returned, he remained at the window for a few more minutes, his heart pounding in his chest. He had just witnessed something that would change everything. His investments in bitcoins and his accumulated assets in fixed income seemed insignificant in the face of the urgency of what he had witnessed. The question now was, what would he do with this information? That night, the girl slept on the floor of the yard, where her aunt had left her as a punishment for making too much noise during the afternoon. The child curled up in her own t-shirt and looked at the stars through the branches of the magnolia tree. In her 4-year-old mind, she made a silent wish to her mother, wherever she was, that someone, anyone, would take her away from that place of pain. Across the street, the millionaire couldn't sleep, tormented by the certainty that he needed to act, but paralyzed by the same emotional inertia that had consumed him since his wife's passing. His applications and investment funds were worthless if he couldn't use his position to help a child in danger. 3 days had passed since the millionaire discovered the child's identity, and guilt consumed him like a slow fire. During those days, He had systematically documented the episodes of violence, always at 3 o'clock, always with the same methodical brutality. His collection of videos and audios grew, but his courage to act remained paralyzed by the same cowardice that had haunted him since the night he lost his wife. On that Thursday morning, the retired teacher made a decision that would change the course of everything. She had spent the night awake, tormented by the certainty that a child was suffering just meters from her house. Her 4 decades as an educator had taught her to recognize the signs, and all of them were present in the colonial house. She decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of attempting a new direct visit to the aunt, she opted for a more subtle strategy. At 7 in the morning, she positioned herself in the side yard of her house, the place from which she had the best view of the backyard of the colonial house. What she saw horrified her. The girl was sitting under the magnolia tree, completely alone, wearing only a torn t-shirt and underwear. Her small arms were marked by evident burns, some still red and inflamed. The child was drawing in the dirt with a piece of charcoal, creating shapes that the teacher recognized as birds. "My God," whispered the educator, her hands trembling as she held onto the fence that separated the yards. It was worse than she imagined, much worse. The girl looked up and saw the woman watching her. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. Then, to the teacher's surprise, the child smiled, a weak but genuine smile, and waved shyly. "Hi, Grandma," said the girl with her tiny voice, using the affectionate term she gave to all elderly ladies. "Hi, my dear," replied the teacher, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Are you okay?" The girl looked quickly at the windows of the house before answering. "Yes, I am. I'm just drawing birds." "How lovely. Do you like birds?" "I like them a lot. They can fly wherever they want," replied the child, her big eyes shining with a sadness that broke the educator's heart. At that moment, the aunt's harsh voice echoed from inside the house. "Girl! Where are you?" The terror that instantly took over the child's face said everything the teacher needed to know. The girl stood up quickly, wiped her hands on her t-shirt, and ran into the house, but not before looking once more at the teacher with an expression that screamed for help. The educator remained in the yard for a few more minutes, processing what she had seen. The burns, the fear, the way the child reacted to the aunt's voice. Everything confirmed her worst fears. She could no longer pretend she didn't know what was happening. Meanwhile, across the street, the millionaire had witnessed the entire interaction. Through his window, he could partially see the backyard, and the sight of the marks on the girl's arms made him sick. For the first time in 5 years, he felt a genuine fury burning in his chest. His former employee had trusted him in some way, even if indirectly, even if he didn't know it at the time. She had left her daughter in the care of a family that lived in the same city where he lived. And now this child was being tortured while he watched from his comfortable window, paralyzed by his own cowardice. At 11 in the morning, the teacher made a courageous decision. She put on her best formal attire, took a tray of homemade sweets that she had prepared as a pretext, and went again to the colonial house. This time, she would not take no for an answer. The aunt answered the door reluctantly, clearly irritated by the neighbor's insistence. "Mrs. Abernathy, I already told you that it's not a good time." "Dear, I brought some cookies I made yesterday," interrupted the educator firmly, "and I insist on getting to know the little one better. As old neighbors, it is our duty to support each other." Before the aunt could protest, the teacher had already entered the house, using all the authority that decades of classroom had given her. The interior of the colonial house was dark and smelled of mold mixed with alcohol. Old and poorly maintained furniture occupied the room, and there was a heavy atmosphere that made the air seem difficult to breathe. "The girl is sleeping," the aunt lied, blocking the path to the back of the house. "That's a shame. Maybe some other time then," said the teacher, but her experienced eyes had already catalogued several disturbing details. Dark stains on the kitchen floor that seemed to have been poorly cleaned, a metal spoon left on the stove, and especially small charcoal drawings on the walls that clearly had been made by a child. At that moment, a low sound came from the direction of the kitchen, a muffled sob, almost imperceptible. The teacher and the aunt froze. The silence that followed was tense and revealing. "Must be the neighbor's cat," said the aunt quickly, but her voice trembled slightly. The educator smiled and nodded, but she had decided that she had seen enough. "Well, I'll let you rest then. But remember that I'm always here next door if you need anything." Anything at all. The teacher's tone made it clear that it wasn't just a casual offer of help, it was a subtle but direct warning. After the educator left, the aunt locked the door shut and went to the kitchen, where she found the girl curled up behind the stove trying to hide. The child had cried when she heard the teacher's gentle voice, remembering the kindness she had once known. "You were making noise," accused the aunt, her eyes already shining with the familiar fury. "No, Aunt, I didn't make noise," protested the girl, but her small voice sounded weak even to her. The aunt picked up the metal spoon that was on the stove and put it directly in the flame. The girl recognized the ritual and began to tremble. She knew what was coming next. "You want to attract attention, don't you?" hissed the aunt as the spoon heated up. "You want the neighbors to come here and ask questions? Do you think I don't know how to take care of you?" Across the street, the millionaire had positioned his cell phone at the window and was recording again. This time, he managed to capture not only the sounds, but also partial images through the kitchen window. What he saw made him make a decision that would change everything. He could no longer be just a silent observer. His former employee had been a good person, a dedicated worker who always spoke of her daughter with love. That child was his responsibility now, whether he wanted it or not. While the girl suffered yet another episode of systematic torture, the businessman made a call he hadn't made in months. He called his personal lawyer and old college buddy, Irving Caldwell. "Irv, I need your help with a delicate situation," he said, watching through the window as the girl's screams echoed through the afternoon. "It's about a child, and I think it might be a matter of life and death. His investment fund applications and all his net worth accumulated over the years meant nothing if he couldn't use his resources to save that child." That night, after the aunt passed out drunk on the living room couch, the girl managed to slip silently into the yard. Her fresh burns throbbed, but the physical pain was less than the pain in her heart. She sat under the magnolia tree and looked at the stars, humming her mother's lullaby softly. What she didn't know was that for the first time in months, someone was truly paying attention to her suffering. And that, in the coming days, her life would change in ways she couldn't even imagine. The lawyer arrived at the millionaire's condo on Friday morning with a grave look on his face. The two men had been classmates at the University of Virginia almost 3 decades ago, and the lawyer knew well the emotional isolation his friend had built after the loss of his wife. Therefore, the urgent phone call the night before had surprised him so much. "I need you to tell me exactly what's going on," the lawyer said, sitting in the spacious living room of the condo. "You mentioned a child in danger, but I need details." The millionaire poured coffee and stood by the window, the spot that had become his obsession in recent days. "The girl who lives in the house across the street is the daughter of a former employee of mine. She's being mistreated by the aunt who's taking care of her." "Mistreated how?" asked the lawyer, taking a notepad from his briefcase. "Burns, daily screams, neglect." The businessman paused, struggling with the words. "I have recordings, evidence of what's happening." The lawyer was silent for a moment, processing the information. "This is very serious. If you have evidence of child abuse, you need to contact Child Protective Services immediately." "I know," replied the millionaire, running his hands over his face. "But there's something else. My former employee worked for me for 3 years. She left abruptly 5 years ago, a few months before the accident with my wife. I never understood why, but now Now you feel responsible, completed the lawyer, understanding the emotional complexity of the situation. The businessman nodded. If I had paid more attention at the time, maybe I could have helped. Maybe she wouldn't have needed to leave her daughter with that woman. At that moment, the familiar sound of screams echoed from the house across the street, even though it was only 9 in the morning. Both men turned to the window, and the lawyer could see the look of anguish on his friend's face. "This happens every day?" he asked, horrified. "At 3 in the afternoon, religiously, but sometimes at other times too," replied the millionaire, picking up his cell phone. "Want to see the recordings?" The lawyer watched the videos in growing silence, his face paling with each scene. As a specialist in family law, he had seen many cases of child abuse, but something about the systematization of that violence disturbed him deeply. "We can't wait any longer. I need you to give me all these recordings today. I'm going to contact Child Protective Services and the district attorney's office. That child needs to be removed from that house immediately." While the two men planned the intervention, across the street, the girl was living another day of terror. The aunt had woken up with a particularly severe hangover and discovered that there was no more alcohol at home. Her irritation multiplied when she found new drawings of birds that the child had made on the kitchen wall during the early hours. "How many times do I have to tell you not to mess up the walls?" screamed the aunt, holding the girl by the arm hard enough to leave marks. "You are a plague, a curse on this house." The girl tried to explain, to say that she had dreamed of her mother and that the drawings made her feel less alone, but the words were lost in sobs. At 4 years old, she still didn't fully understand why her aunt hated her so much, why each day brought new pain. "You're going to be locked in the room until I decide what to do with you," continued the aunt, pushing the child down the hall. "And if I hear even a noise, you'll experience a punishment you've never experienced before." The room where the girl was locked was small and stuffy, with only a high window that she couldn't reach. There she curled up in the corner and began to hum her mother's lullaby softly, the melody being her only source of comfort in a world that seemed to have forgotten that she existed. It was that song that the retired teacher heard as she passed by the house on her way to the Piggly Wiggly supermarket. The educator had spent the whole night thinking about the conversation with the girl in the yard, the marks she had seen on the child's arms, the atmosphere of fear that permeated that house. The teacher stopped in front of the gate and listened. The girl's voice was weak, but full of a sadness that broke the educator's heart. At that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going to the supermarket, she went directly to downtown Charleston, where the small office of Child Protective Services was located. She knew the counselor well, a former student of hers who had dedicated herself to protecting vulnerable children. "I need to talk to you about a very serious situation," said the teacher, entering the office without ceremony. The counselor looked up from the papers she was analyzing. "Mrs. Abernathy, it's good to see you. What brings you here today?" "A child in danger, my neighbor. I'm sure she's being mistreated." The counselor straightened up in her chair, her expression becoming immediately serious. During her 5 years as a counselor, she had learned to recognize when a complaint was serious, and the teacher wasn't the kind of person who would make frivolous accusations. "Tell me everything," said the counselor, picking up a complaint form. While the teacher reported her observations across town, the lawyer was in a similar meeting at the district attorney's office. The prosecutor listened attentively as the lawyer presented the evidence collected by the millionaire. "This is compelling evidence," said the prosecutor, examining the videos on the lawyer's cell phone. "I'm going to order an immediate investigation and request the removal of the child from the family environment." "How long will this take?" asked the lawyer, concerned. "With this evidence, we can act today," replied the prosecutor. "I'm going to contact Child Protective Services now." Thus, by a coincidence that would change the girl's destiny, 2 simultaneous complaints reached Child Protective Services on the same morning. The counselor was finishing noting the teacher's report when her phone rang. Child Protective Services, this is the counselor speaking. This is the prosecutor. I need you to make an urgent intervention in a house on Main Street. We have evidence of serious child abuse. The counselor paused, her pen suspended over the paper. Is it by any chance the yellow colonial house? Exactly. How did you know? I just received a complaint about the same house, replied the counselor, looking at the teacher with surprise. 2 independent sources. This confirms the seriousness of the situation. At 2 in the afternoon, a coordinated operation was being set up. The counselor, accompanied by 2 social workers and a bailiff, was heading to the colonial house. The teacher had offered to accompany the team, using her experience with traumatized children. The millionaire watched everything from his window, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, after days of paralysis, he had managed to act. His lawyer was by his side, both witnessing the moment that would change the girl's life forever. You did the right thing, said the lawyer, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. I hope it's not too late, replied the businessman, his eyes fixed on the team approaching the colonial house. All his capital accumulated through dividends and interest on investments meant nothing compared to that moment. At the house, the aunt had gone out to buy alcohol at the local bar, leaving the girl locked in the stuffy room. The child continued to sing softly, unaware that her life was about to change radically. When the counselor knocked on the door of the colonial house and received no answer, she used her legal authority to enter the property. What they found inside surpassed even their worst expectations. A dirty and poorly maintained house, a strong smell of alcohol, and obvious signs of neglect in every room. It was the teacher who first heard the weak voice coming from the room in the back. There's someone here, she said, guiding the team down the hall. When they opened the door to the room and found the girl curled up in the corner, singing her sad song, everyone present felt a pang in their heart. The child looked up with big, frightened eyes, not understanding who those people were or what they wanted from her. Hi, my dear, said the counselor, crouching down to be at the child's height. My name is Donna. We've come to help you. The girl looked at the teacher, recognizing the kind woman who had talked to her in the yard. A glimmer of hope shone in her eyes, but was quickly replaced by fear. Aunt's going to be angry, she whispered. You don't need to worry about that now, said the teacher, reaching out to the child. We're going to get out of here, okay? And so, after 8 months of silent suffering, the girl was finally removed from the house where she had known only pain and fear, beginning a journey that would lead her back to the light she had lost when her parents left this world. The exit from the colonial house was a moment that would be engraved in the memory of all those present. The child held tightly to the teacher's hand, her steps small and hesitant as she crossed the door that had been her prison for so many months. Her big eyes scanned the streets of Charleston as if she were seeing the world for the first time. Where are we going, Grandma? Asked the girl, using again the affectionate term she had given to the teacher. To a safe place, my dear, replied the educator, gently squeezing the child's little hand. A place where no one will hurt you ever again. The counselor coordinated the operation efficiently, but her heart broke as she observed the girl's physical and emotional state. The child was visibly malnourished. Her clothes were inadequate and dirty, and the burn marks on her arms told a story of systematic suffering that no child should know. Across the street, the millionaire watched the scene through his window, a mixture of relief and anxiety consuming his chest. Finally, after days of torturous inaction, he had managed to do something concrete. But now a new worry haunted him. What would happen to the girl from here on out? The lawyer, who remained by his side, noticed his friend's tension. The important thing is that she's safe now, he said. We'll solve the rest step by step. But where are they going to take her? Asked the businessman, seeing the small entourage moving away down the cobblestone street. Probably to a foster family while they investigate the case. It's standard procedure. At that moment, the teacher turned and looked directly at the window where the millionaire was watching. Their eyes met for an instant, and the educator gave a discreet nod, as if she knew that he had been a fundamental part of that rescue operation. Meanwhile, in the local bar, the aunt was finishing her third drink when she saw unusual movement on her street through the foggy window of the establishment. Her blood ran cold as she recognized official uniforms and people who clearly didn't belong in that quiet neighborhood. "What the hell is going on there?" she muttered, staggering up from the table. The owner of the bar followed her gaze. "Looks like the authorities are at your house. You're not in trouble with the law, are you?" The aunt didn't answer. She threw some coins on the table and ran out of the bar, tripping on the uneven cobblestones of the sidewalk. Her heart was beating erratically, not only from the alcohol, but from the growing terror that her actions had finally been discovered. When she arrived at her house, she found the door open and two social workers taking detailed notes on the conditions of the property. The counselor was waiting for her in the living room, her expression serious and professional. "Are you the one responsible for the child?" asked the counselor. "What are you doing in my house? Where's the girl?" The aunt tried to seem indignant, but her voice trembled visibly. "The child is under state protection," replied the counselor firmly. "We received serious reports of mistreatment, and we have substantial evidence of child abuse." "That's a lie. I take good care of my niece." "Who made these false accusations?" The counselor showed her the official documents. "Ma'am, the child presents multiple injuries consistent with intentional burns, in addition to obvious signs of malnutrition and neglect. We have recordings of the episodes of violence and witnesses who witnessed the girl's suffering." The aunt turned pale. "Recordings? Witnesses?" She looked instinctively at the kitchen window, realizing for the first time that it was visible from the building across the street. She had always tortured the girl in that location without worrying about who might be watching. "She's a difficult child," she tried to justify herself, but her words sounded weak even to herself. "Sometimes I needed to be firmer, but I never hurt her on purpose. The situation is very serious. The child will be temporarily placed under alternative care while the case is investigated. You will have the right to a lawyer and may contest the charges through the appropriate legal channels." Meanwhile, the girl was being taken to an emergency medical examination at the small town hospital. The local pediatrician was shocked to examine the child. In his 20 years of profession, he had seen cases of child abuse, but the systematization of the injuries was particularly disturbing. "These burns are all intentional," he explained to the counselor after the exam. "They all have the same pattern, suggesting repeated use of the same heated object. In addition, the child is significantly underweight for her age." "How long will she need to recover physically?" asked the counselor. "The burns will heal with proper care, but the psychological trauma, that will take much longer." The girl, wearing clean hospital pajamas, was sitting on a bed in pediatrics, watching everything around her with a mixture of fear and fascination. It was the first time in months that she had been in a truly clean and safe environment. The teacher had remained with her throughout the medical examination, offering herself as a figure of family support. "Grandma, can I stay with you?" asked the girl, holding the teacher's hand. "We'll see what's possible, my dear," replied the educator, touched by the trust that the child placed in her. The counselor, observing the interaction between the two, began to form an idea. The teacher was a respected person in the community, with experience in child education, and, clearly, the girl felt safe with her. Perhaps there was a solution that didn't involve further separating the child from someone she already considered family. That afternoon, while the girl rested in the hospital under medical care, an important meeting took place at the Child Protective Services office. The counselor, the teacher, the lawyer, and to everyone's surprise, the millionaire, were gathered to discuss the immediate future of the child. "Sir, I understand that you knew the girl's mother," said the counselor, consulting her notes. "She worked for my company for 3 years, confirmed the businessman, his voice filled with emotion. "She was an exemplary employee and a dedicated mother. If I had known what was happening with the child— The important thing is that now we know, interrupted the teacher. The question is, what do we do from now on? This child needs stability, love, and specialized care. The counselor addressed the teacher. Mrs. Abernathy, would you be willing to become a temporary foster family for the girl, considering that she has already established a bond with you? The teacher didn't hesitate. Of course, yes. I have experience with children. My house is suitable and, well, I think the girl and I have already chosen each other. The lawyer spoke up. My client would like to contribute financially to the child's care. He feels responsible, considering his connection with the child's mother. The millionaire nodded. I want to ensure that she has access to the best medical and psychological care available. I would also like to get to know her better, if that is appropriate. I feel I owe it to her mother's memory. The counselor made careful notes. We will proceed as follows. The girl will be temporarily with Mrs. Abernathy while we make a full assessment of the family situation. You may contribute to the costs and, if you wish, establish a gradual relationship with the child, always supervised and focused on her well-being. When the meeting ended, the millionaire felt relieved to finally have a concrete way to help. But he was also nervous about the prospect of personally meeting his former employee's daughter. What kind of connection could they form? And above all, would he be able to overcome his own guilt to become a positive presence in the child's life? All his wealth accumulated through dividends and interest from investments meant nothing if he couldn't use those resources to give the girl the life she deserved. That night the girl slept in a clean and safe bed for the first time in 8 months. In the guest room of the teacher's house, surrounded by borrowed stuffed animals and covered with a warm blanket, she finally managed to rest without fear. Her last thoughts before falling asleep were about birds. No longer the trapped birds she drew on the walls of her aunt's house, but free birds flying high in the blue sky of Charleston. The first week at the teacher's house was a period of delicate discoveries and gradual healing. The child woke up every morning at 6 o'clock, the time she used to be awakened by the aunt with screams, and remained still in bed, waiting for the first sign of violence. When she realized that there was only silence and the aroma of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen, a timid relief took over her little heart. The teacher, with her decades of experience dealing with traumatized children, knew that recovery would be slow. She established a gentle routine. Breakfast at the kitchen table, bathed in sunlight, then free time in the flower-filled yard, and always, always, plenty of patience with the sudden silences and tremors that still plagued the girl. "Good morning, my little blossom," the educator would say every morning, using a gentle tone that made the child's eyes fill with tears, not of pain, but of an emotion she had almost forgotten existed. On the third day, something extraordinary happened. The girl was in the teacher's yard, watching a hummingbird visiting the red flowers of the garden, when she began to hum her mother's lullaby softly. But this time, for the first time in months, her voice wasn't choked by fear. The teacher, who was watering the plants nearby, stopped to listen. It was a beautiful melody, full of longing, but also of hope. When the child finished, she looked at the educator with an expression almost surprised at herself. "My mom used to sing this song," she said, her voice still weak but firmer than before. "She was a mum who loved you very much," replied the teacher, crouching next to the girl, "and I'm sure she would be very happy to know that you're safe now." It was at that moment that the millionaire appeared at the gate. For 3 days he had been gathering courage to make that visit, always finding an excuse to postpone it. The lawyer had arranged the meeting with the teacher, explaining that it would be important for the child's healing process to meet people who had loved her mother. The girl hid behind the teacher when she saw the tall, well-dressed man approaching. The businessman stopped a few feet away, noticing the fear in the child's eyes. "Hi, sweetie," he said softly, crouching down to be closer to her height. "My name is, well, you can call me Uncle Braxton." I knew your mummy. The girl's eyes widened. It had been so long since anyone had talked about her mother that she had begun to wonder if her memories were real or just dreams. You knew my mom? She asked, timidly coming out from behind the teacher. I did. She worked with me, and she always spoke of you with great affection. She said you were the most important thing in her life. The child processed this information in silence for a few moments. Then, to everyone's surprise, she took a step towards the millionaire. She sang a song to me, she said. Grandma said she loved me very much. Your mum loved you more than anything in the world, confirmed the businessman, feeling an intense emotion rise in his throat, and she would be very proud to see how brave you are. During the following weeks, the millionaire began to visit the girl regularly. Always accompanied by the teacher and always respecting the child's pace, he gradually became a familiar and comforting presence in her new life. It was during one of these visits that something happened that changed everything. The girl was playing in the yard with some toys that the businessman had brought. Not expensive or extravagant toys, but simple things like crayons and paper, which she used to draw her favorite birds. Uncle Braxton, she said. She had started calling him that spontaneously. Can you tell me more things about my mom? The millionaire sat on the ground next to her, something he had never imagined doing before. All his wealth accumulated in real estate and assets meant nothing compared to that simple moment. Sure, your mum was very smart. She organized all the important papers in my company and never made mistakes. Was she pretty? Asked the child, drawing what appeared to be a woman next to a bird. She was very pretty, and she had a smile just like yours when you're happy. The girl smiled, and the businessman realized that it was the first time he had seen that child truly happy. The smile lit up her whole face, transforming her completely. Uncle Braxton, can you be my daddy now? She asked suddenly, with the cruel innocence that only children possess. The question struck the millionaire like lightning. He looked at the teacher, who was watching the scene with tears in her eyes, and then at the girl, who was staring at him with a hope so pure that it made his heart break and mend at the same time. Sweetie, my dear, he began, choosing his words carefully, I can't be your daddy because you already had a daddy who loved you very much. But I can be someone who takes care of you, who protects you, and who will always be here when you need me. The child considered this for a moment. Like a real uncle? Exactly like a real uncle. That night, after the girl fell asleep, the teacher and the millionaire talked for a long time on the porch of the house. The educator had noticed the transformation, not only in the child, but also in the businessman. He had exchanged his formal suits for more casual clothes during the visits. His laughter had become more frequent, and she could see that caring for the girl was healing something deep inside him. She's recovering well, said the teacher, but she still has nightmares some nights. She wakes up crying and calling for her mother. It's understandable, replied the millionaire. She's been through so much trauma. Do you think we should seek specialized psychological help? I'm already arranging that. I know an excellent child psychologist in the neighboring town. She can come here a few times a week. I'll pay all the costs, said the businessman immediately, thinking about how his profits and dividends would finally have a real purpose. Can I ask you something? Said the teacher. Sure. Why do you feel so responsible for the girl? I know you knew her mother, but there's something more, isn't there? The millionaire was silent for a long time, looking at the stars that shone over Charleston. Finally he spoke. When her mother resigned, I was going through a very difficult time in my marriage. My wife and I argued constantly. I was focused only on my own problems. She tried to talk to me a few times. She seemed worried about something, but I was so absorbed in my own issues that I didn't pay attention. He paused, his voice choked with emotion. If I had been a better boss, a better human being, maybe she would have felt comfortable telling me about her difficulties. Maybe I could have helped, prevented her from having to leave her daughter with her aunt. You can't blame yourself for that, said the teacher softly. I can. And I'll carry that guilt forever. But now I have a chance to do something right, to honor her memory by taking care of her daughter. That night, the businessman made a decision that would change not only his life, but also the girl's future. He would seek out the lawyer the next morning to discuss the possibility of becoming officially responsible for the child, together with the teacher. All his net worth and his investments in gold and cryptocurrency were worthless if he couldn't use them to give the girl the family she deserved. Meanwhile, in the guest room, the child slept peacefully for the first time in her life. In the guest room of the teacher's house, surrounded by borrowed stuffed animals and covered with a warm blanket, she finally managed to rest without fear. Her last thoughts before falling asleep were about birds. No longer the trapped birds she drew on the walls of her aunt's house, but free birds, flying high in the blue sky of Charleston. 2 weeks after the conversation on the porch, the girl had turned into an almost unrecognizable child. Her hair, once always dirty and tangled, now shone under the teacher's loving care. Her cheeks had gained color, her eyes had regained the natural sparkle of childhood, and she had begun to talk more, sharing small stories and asking curious questions about the world around her. On that Tuesday morning, something unexpected happened. The child was drawing at the kitchen table when she asked the teacher, "Grandma, why did Auntie hurt me?" The question caught the educator off guard. She had prepared for this moment, talking with the child psychologist about how to address the trauma when the girl was ready to talk about it. "My dear," said the teacher, sitting next to the child, "some adult people get very sad and angry with life, and sometimes they hurt other people, especially little children like you, but that didn't happen because you did something wrong." "I did do something wrong," insisted the girl, her voice becoming small. "Auntie always said that I was a curse, that because of me, Mommy left." The teacher felt her heart clench. "Sweetie, look at me," she said, gently holding the child's face. "Your mommy didn't leave because of you. Your mommy loved you more than anything in the world, and you were never, ever a curse. You are a blessing." At that moment the doorbell rang. It was the millionaire, arriving for his daily visit. When he entered the kitchen and saw the girl with red eyes, he immediately worried. "What happened?" he asked, crouching next to her chair. "The little one was telling me about her feelings," explained the teacher. The child looked at the businessman with a serious expression beyond her 4 years. "Uncle Braxton, Auntie said that I killed my mom. Is it true?" The question was like a punch to the gut for the millionaire. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength to respond as gently as possible. "Sweetie, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you," he began, his voice firm but loving. "Your mom passed away because she got sick, very sick. It had nothing to do with you, and wherever she is now, she's proud of the brave girl that you are." "But if I hadn't been born, she wouldn't have gotten sick," insisted the child. "If you hadn't been born, your mother would never have known true happiness," replied the businessman. "She told me that you were the light of her life, the reason why she smiled every day." The girl processed these words in silence. Then something unexpected happened. She stood up from the chair and hugged the millionaire, a tight and desperate hug from a child who had finally found a safe haven. "I like you, Uncle Braxton," she murmured against his chest. "I like you very much too," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. That afternoon, while the girl played in the yard, the teacher and the millionaire received an unexpected visit. The counselor arrived with a worried look on her face. "We need to talk," she said, sitting in the living room. "I received news about the aunt." "What happened?" asked the teacher, immediately alert. "She's contesting the removal of the girl's custody. She got a lawyer and is claiming that the accusations are unfounded, that she was the victim of a conspiracy of neighbors." The millionaire stood up abruptly. "That's impossible. We have recordings, medical evidence, witnesses." "I know," said the counselor, trying to calm him down. "And our evidence is solid, but the legal process can extend for months." During that period, there is a possibility that a judge will order supervised visits. The idea of the girl having to see her aunt again made the teacher's blood run cold. She can't be exposed to that. She's barely started to recover. There's something else, continued the counselor. The aunt's lawyer is questioning the suitability of the current arrangement. They are arguing that the child should be in a traditional family, not with a single, retired lady. That's ridiculous, protested the millionaire. The teacher has provided the girl with more love and care in 2 weeks than she received in 8 months with her aunt. I completely agree, said the counselor, but we need to prepare for this legal battle. You need a strong lawyer. My lawyer is excellent, said the businessman immediately. He will represent us. It was at that moment that the girl ran into the room, interrupting the serious conversation of the adults. She was holding a drawing she had made in the yard. Look, she said, showing the paper. I drew our family. The drawing showed 3 figures. A woman with grey hair that clearly represented the teacher, a tall man in a suit who was the millionaire, and between them a small girl smiling. Everyone was holding hands, and there were colourful birds flying around them. The counselor watched the drawing with professional interest. Sweetie, can you tell me about your drawing? It's Grandma, Uncle Braxton, and me, explained the child. We're a family, and the birdies are happy because nobody hurts them. And where are you in the drawing? Asked the counselor. In the middle, replied the girl, as if it were obvious. Because they take care of me on both sides. After the counselor left, the millionaire stayed at the teacher's house until late, the 2 adults discussing strategies to protect the child from a possible, protracted legal battle. There's something I need to tell you, said the businessman finally. I talked to my lawyer about the possibility of adoption. The teacher raised her eyes, surprised. Adoption? A joint adoption, he explained. Both of us, as a permanent foster family. My lawyer said that cases like this are rare, but possible, especially considering the unique circumstances of the situation. It would mean that we would become legally responsible for the girl, forever. She would have a stable home, resources for education and health, and above all, people who love her unconditionally. The teacher was silent for a long moment, processing the proposal. And are you sure that's what you want? Raising a child isn't something temporary. It's a lifelong commitment. I'm absolutely sure, he replied without hesitating. The girl has already changed my life in ways I never imagined were possible. She has given me a purpose that I had lost a long time ago. All his wealth in euros and dollars, his multi-million-dollar businesses, none of that mattered as much as that little child who had entered his life and changed everything. And if her mother didn't approve? Asked the teacher. The millionaire thought carefully before answering. I think she would want her daughter to be raised by people who love her. And I believe she would know that we are doing this out of love, not out of guilt or obligation. That night, after the girl fell asleep, the teacher went into the room to check if she was okay. The child slept peacefully, hugging a teddy bear that the millionaire had brought. On her nightstand was the drawing of the family that she had made as if it were her most precious treasure. My little warrior, whispered the teacher, adjusting the blanket. You don't know it yet, but you have 2 people willing to move mountains to protect you. Across town, in his apartment, the businessman looked through the same window from where he had observed the girl's suffering months ago. But now, instead of guilt and paralysis, he felt determination and hope. It didn't matter what the aunt and her lawyer tried to do. He and the teacher would fight with all their might to ensure that the child never knew fear and pain again. His wealth accumulated through investments and returns on investments finally had a true purpose. The battle for the girl's official custody was just beginning, but she had already conquered something much more important, a family that truly loved her. But across town, the aunt had not given up. Sitting in her lawyer's office, she planned her next move, determined to get the child back, not out of love, but for a much more sinister reason that she had not yet revealed to anyone. The legal battle began 3 weeks later, and with it came a discovery that no one expected. The millionaire's lawyer had spent days investigating the aunt's history when he found information that completely changed the course of the case. In his office, he presented his findings to the businessman and the teacher with a grave expression. "You need to know what I discovered about the aunt," said the lawyer, spreading documents on the table. "She's not just a woman with alcohol problems. There's something much more serious here." "What do you mean?" asked the millionaire, flipping through the papers. "The aunt was fired from City Hall, not only for absences, but for suspicion of embezzlement of funds destined for children's social programs. She was never formally charged because the evidence mysteriously disappeared, but the internal records show an ongoing investigation." The teacher paled. "She was stealing money meant for children?" "Apparently, yes. And there's more," continued the lawyer. "I found medical records that show that the girl's mother was hospitalized several times in the months leading up to her departure, always with injuries that doctors considered suspicious, but she never wanted to talk about how they happened." A heavy silence took over the room. The millionaire got up and walked to the window, processing the information. "Are you saying that the aunt also abused the child's mother?" "It's very likely. And that would explain why she left town so abruptly. She wasn't just running from financial problems, she was running from her own sister." The teacher covered her face with her hands. "My God! And she left the girl with that woman? Why?" "Probably didn't have a choice," replied the lawyer. "The mother was sick, she had no resources, she had nowhere to go. The aunt must have taken advantage of her sister's desperate situation." At that moment, the office door opened, and the counselor entered with an urgent expression on her face. "Good thing you're all here. I have important news." "What happened?" asked the millionaire. "The aunt was arrested last night. Public intoxication and assault on a shopkeeper in downtown Charleston. But that's not all." The counselor paused, taking a deep breath. "During the arrest, she made some disturbing statements about the girl." "What kind of statements?" asked the teacher, fearing the answer. "She said that the girl deserved everything she got, and that if she could, she would do worse." The sheriff considered the statements as additional evidence that she is not fit to care for a child. The lawyer perked up. "That's excellent for our case. I will use these statements as evidence that the aunt represents a continued danger to the child." "There's something else," continued the counselor. "The aunt's lawyer has abandoned the case. Apparently she couldn't pay the fees and, well, the statements she made didn't help her cause." While the adults discussed legal matters, the girl was living her happiest days since she could remember. That morning, she had helped the teacher make sugar cookies, her small hands covered in flour as she laughed at something the educator had said. It was a sound that the millionaire never tired of hearing, the pure and crystalline laughter of a truly happy child. "Uncle Braxton!" shouted the girl when she saw him arrive for lunch. "I made cookies for you." "Really? And how did you know I was hungry?" he joked, picking her up in his arms. "Because you always get hungry when you come here," she replied, giggling. During lunch, the child chattered excitedly about her day, about the birds she'd seen in the backyard, about the storybook her teacher had read to her. It was hard to believe this vibrant, talkative child was the same silent, terrified girl they'd rescued weeks ago. "Sweetheart," the millionaire said carefully, "Grandma and I want to talk to you about something important." "What is it?" she asked, pausing her eating. "Would you like to live with Grandma forever? And I would keep visiting every day, taking care of you, being your real Uncle Braxton." The girl's eyes widened. "Forever? Really?" "Forever," confirmed Mrs. Abernathy, holding the child's small hand. "If you want to, of course." "What about Auntie?" The millionaire and the teacher exchanged a glance. They decided to be honest with the girl, within age-appropriate limits. "Auntie can't take care of you anymore," Mrs. Abernathy explained gently. "She needs help to solve her own problems first." The child was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Then, to the adult's surprise, she smiled, a huge, radiant smile. "So I can stay with you forever, and no one will ever hurt me again." "Never again," promised the millionaire, his voice firm. "I promise you'll always be safe with us." The girl got up from her chair and hugged Mrs. Abernathy first, then Braxton. "I love you," she said, words that deeply moved both adults. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. The child was playing in the yard when she saw an unfamiliar man standing on the sidewalk, watching the house. She ran inside, seeking Mrs. Abernathy. "Grandma, there's a man outside looking at us," she said, clearly frightened. Mrs. Abernathy went to the window and saw a middle-aged man, thin and shabbily dressed, standing across the street. Something about his posture made her uneasy. "Honey, go to your room and play, okay?" she said, picking up the phone. The retired teacher immediately called Braxton, who was on his way to a meeting. "There's a strange man watching the house." The child got scared. "I'm coming there now," he replied, mentally cancelling all his appointments for the day. When the businessman arrived, the man was still there. He got out of his car and walked straight to the stranger. "Can I help you with something?" the millionaire asked, his tone polite but firm. The man turned, revealing a face etched with alcohol and a hostile expression. "You must be the rich guy who's bankrolling all this," he said with disdain. "Who are you?" the businessman asked, keeping his distance but remaining alert. "I'm Auntie's cousin, and I came to see where the little girl who ruined my cousin's life is." "The girl didn't ruin anyone's life," the millionaire replied, feeling anger rising in his chest. "And I suggest you leave immediately." "Oh yeah? And who's going to make me leave? You think because you have money you can do whatever you want?" At that moment, Mrs. Abernathy came out of the house with the phone in her hand. "I've already called the police," she announced. "They're on their way." The aunt's cousin spat on the ground and stepped back, but not before giving the house a threatening look. "This isn't over," he muttered before disappearing down the street. When the police arrived, they took the statement and promised to keep the area under surveillance. But the incident left everyone shaken, especially because it showed that the aunt's family hadn't accepted the situation. That night, the girl had her first nightmare in 2 weeks. She woke up crying, calling for Mrs. Abernathy. When the retired teacher rushed to her room, she found the child shaking under the covers. "It was just a bad dream, sweetheart," Mrs. Abernathy consoled, hugging her. "I dreamed that Auntie came back to get me," sobbed the girl. "That's never going to happen," Mrs. Abernathy promised. "We won't let it." "You really promise?" "I promise with all my heart." But while comforting the child, Mrs. Abernathy couldn't help but worry. The cousin's appearance had shown that the battle for the girl was far from over, and she knew they would do anything to protect that child, even if it meant facing a war. The millionaire, upon hearing of the girl's nightmare, made a drastic decision. His investments in assets and Treasury Direct, all his cash flow, would be directed to ensure the child's safety. He would hire the best security available and do everything in his power to protect his new family. The following days brought a constant tension that hung over Mrs. Abernathy's house like a dark cloud. The aunt's cousin had returned 2 more times, always keeping enough distance not to be considered trespassing, but clearly intimidating. The millionaire had hired discreet security to watch the area, but the sense of threat remained. The girl, with her childish sensitivity sharpened by past trauma, sensed something was wrong. Her smiles became less frequent, and she began to cling more to Mrs. Abernathy, especially when they left the house. "Grandma, why does that man keep looking at our house?" she asked one morning while having breakfast. The retired teacher chose her words carefully. "Some people get confused when other people are happy, sweetheart. But you don't have to worry. We're taking care of everything." "Is Uncle taking care of it too?" "Of course, yes. We're both always taking care of you." That afternoon, while the child was playing in the yard under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Abernathy, the millionaire arrived with Irv and a woman she didn't know. The woman was elegant, middle-aged, with a gentle but professional smile. "Sweetheart," called the businessman, "come and meet someone special. This is Judge Mallory. She's a judge, and she's come to talk to us about our plans." The girl approached shyly. She had learned to trust the people Braxton and Mrs. Abernathy introduced her to, but still maintained a natural caution with strangers. "Hi, sweetheart," said the judge, crouching down to the child's level. "Can I ask you some questions?" "You can," replied the girl, looking at Mrs. Abernathy for encouragement. "Do you like living here with Grandma?" "I like it a lot. She makes me sugar cookies and reads stories to me." "And what do you think of Uncle?" "He's very good. He brought me toys and always plays with me. And he knew my mom." The judge smiled. "Do you feel safe here?" "Yes, I do. No one hurts me here." The conversation continued for a few minutes, with simple questions that allowed the judge to assess the child's emotional well-being and her adaptation to the new home. When she was done, she joined the adults in the living room for a more serious conversation. "From my preliminary assessment," said the judge, "the girl is visibly well-adjusted and happy in this environment. The attorney has shown me all the evidence in the case, and I believe you have a solid foundation for the adoption process." "How long will it take?" asked the millionaire. "Normally, cases like this take between 6 months and a year. But considering the special circumstances and the documented history of abuse, I can expedite the process." Mrs. Abernathy sighed in relief. "What about the auntie's cousin? Can he try something?" "The cousin has a minor but significant criminal record," replied the judge, "mostly related to alcohol. I don't think he has legal grounds to contest, but I'm going to issue a preventative restraining order." That night, after the girl fell asleep, the millionaire stayed for dinner with Mrs. Abernathy. It was something that had become routine in recent weeks, the two discussing the child's care, planning her future, and gradually developing a partnership that went beyond shared responsibility. "Can I ask you something personal?" said Mrs. Abernathy, as they did the dishes together. "Sure. Do you miss the life you had before? The freedom, the tranquility?" The businessman paused, thinking about the question. "You know, I thought I had a full life before. Work, money, comfort. But now I realize I was just existing. The girl gave me a purpose I didn't even know I needed." His assets accumulated through family inheritance, and his billionaire investments seemed empty compared to the simple joy of seeing the child smile. "And aren't you afraid of all this responsibility?" "I am," he admitted. "But it's a different fear than I felt before. Before I was afraid to get involved, to commit, to suffer again. Now I'm afraid of not being good enough for her, of failing when she needs me." "That means you've already committed," observed Mrs. Abernathy with a smile. 2 days later, the situation took an unexpected turn. The child was playing in the yard when she saw the auntie's cousin approaching the gate again. This time, however, he wasn't just watching, he was clearly heading to the house. "Grandma!" screamed the girl, running inside. "The bad man is coming!" Mrs. Abernathy immediately called the security guard Braxton had hired, but the cousin was already banging on the door, forcefully. "Open this door!" he shouted. "I want to talk to you." "Go away!" replied Mrs. Abernathy through the locked door. "You have a restraining order." "I'm not leaving until we talk. That girl belongs to our family." The child was trembling behind Mrs. Abernathy when they heard the sound of glass breaking. The cousin had broken a side window of the house and was trying to get in. It was at that moment that the millionaire arrived, having been alerted by the security guard. He found the cousin halfway inside the house, shouting about family rights and threatening to take the girl by force. "Get out of my house now," ordered the businessman, positioning himself between the intruder and the child. "Your house. This is the house of the girl who destroyed my family. The only person who destroyed anything here was the aunt, torturing an innocent child." The cousin advanced towards the millionaire, but at that moment the security guard and two police officers arrived simultaneously. The situation was quickly controlled, with the man being arrested for trespassing and violating a court order. But the damage was done. The girl had witnessed another scene of violence, and all the progress of the past few weeks seemed threatened. She huddled in the corner of the room, trembling and crying, refusing to talk to anyone. "Sweetheart, honey," Mrs. Abernathy tried, approaching slowly. "It's okay now. The bad man is gone." "He'll be back," sobbed the child. "They always come back, like Auntie always came back." The millionaire knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, look at me. That man won't bother you anymore. I promise." "You can't promise that," she said, her voice small but loaded with painful wisdom. "No one can." It was a moment of brutal clarity for both adults. They realized that despite all the love and care they offered, the child would forever carry the scars of the trauma she experienced. Healing would be a long process, with relapses and challenges they hadn't even imagined. That night, the child psychologist made an emergency visit. After talking to the girl for an hour, she met with the millionaire and Mrs. Abernathy. "Today's incident was a powerful trigger," she explained. The child relived the fear and sense of powerlessness she felt with the aunt. "It will take some time for her to feel safe again." "What can we do?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, clearly shaken. "Keep doing what you're doing. Love, patience, consistency, and maybe it's time to consider moving." The millionaire raised his head. "Moving? This house, as cozy as it is still too close to the places where the girl suffered. A move to a completely new environment could help her build genuinely safe memories." That night, after the child finally fell asleep in Mrs. Abernathy's room, she'd refused to sleep alone. The two adults talked late into the night about this possibility. "Would you sell this house?" asked the businessman. "If it's best for the girl, yes," replied Mrs. Abernathy without hesitation. "This house is just a place. Our family is what matters." "Our family," repeated the millionaire, liking the sound of the words. "Then let's look for a new home, a place where she can grow up without shadows of the past." It was a decision that would change everything once again, but they both knew they would make any sacrifice to ensure the child had the happy and safe childhood she deserved. All the businessman's capital would be directed to finding the perfect place, away from the painful memories, where they could rebuild their lives as a true family. The search for a new house became a joint project that brought renewed energy to the family that was forming. The millionaire had suggested buying a larger property on the outskirts of the historic city, where the girl could have more space to play and they would be away from the painful memories of downtown. "I want you to see some options," he said to Mrs. Abernathy one morning, spreading real estate brochures on the kitchen table. "I found some houses with large gardens, perfect for a child." The girl, who was having breakfast, became interested in the colorful images. "Uncle, are we going to live in a new house?" "If you want to, yes. A house where you can have your own room, a big yard to play in, and where no one from the past can bother us." The child's eyes sparkled with cautious curiosity. "Can I choose the color of my room?" "You can choose everything," replied Mrs. Abernathy, hugging the girl. "Color of the walls, furniture, toys, it will be your special little corner." The following weekend, the three went to see the houses the businessman had pre-selected. The first was too big, cold, and impersonal. The second had a beautiful garden, but it was too close to the main road. It was in the third house that something magical happened. It was a 2-story house, painted light yellow with blue trim, surrounded by a flower garden where colorful butterflies danced among the flowers. It had a wide porch in the front, and in the back a spacious yard with a centuries-old tree that offered generous shade. "Wow," whispered the girl when they got out of the car. "It's like the houses in my drawings." The realtor, a friendly lady, opened the door and invited them in. The interior was cozy, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. It had 3 bedrooms upstairs, a large living room, a spacious kitchen, and, to the child's delight, a small library with built-in bookshelves. "Can I live here right now?" asked the girl, running from one room to another with an excitement she hadn't shown in a long time. "If you like it," replied the millionaire, watching with emotion as the child explored every corner of the house. I like it a lot," she exclaimed, stopping in front of a window overlooking the garden. "Look at all the birds." Indeed, there were several birds in the garden, mockingbirds, robins, cardinals, creating a natural symphony that enchanted everyone. Mrs. Abernathy approached the businessman. "This is the right house," she said softly. "I can feel the positive energy of the place." "I can too," he agreed. "I'm going to make an offer today." His financial resources accumulated through investment funds and Bitcoin investments would finally have the noblest possible use, providing a safe home for the child. 3 weeks later, while the purchase papers were being finalized, something unexpected happened. The attorney urgently called the millionaire on a Thursday morning. "I need you to come to my office immediately. Bring Mrs. Abernathy too. It's about the girl." "What happened?" asked the businessman, his heart racing. "I'd rather explain in person, and maybe it's best to leave the child with someone you trust today." Mrs. Abernathy left the girl with a dear neighbor who always helped when needed, and followed the millionaire to the attorney's office. When they arrived, they found the CPS counselor also present, with a serious expression on her face. "What's going on?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, feeling a chill in her stomach. The attorney took a deep breath. "We received information about the girl's mother." "What kind of information?" asked the businessman. "The mother didn't pass away as we thought," said the counselor carefully. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Abernathy and the millionaire exchanged glances, slowly processing what they had just heard. "What do you mean?" murmured Mrs. Abernathy. "She's alive," said the attorney directly. "The girl's mother is alive and interned in a psychiatric clinic in the state capital for 5 years. The revelation hit them like a tsunami. The millionaire got up abruptly, walking to the window, while Mrs. Abernathy covered her face with her hands. "That's impossible," said the businessman. "The girl told us that she had passed away." "That's what the aunt told the child," explained the counselor. "The mother had a severe nervous breakdown after the constant abuse from her sister. She tried to hurt herself and was interned for treatment. The aunt took custody, claiming that her sister was incapacitated." "And she never got better?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, tears in her eyes. "She's getting better now," said the attorney. "Doctors say she's been asking about her daughter constantly in recent months. The treatment is working." "My God," whispered the millionaire. "And now? What does this mean for the girl?" "It means," said the counselor carefully, "that the mother has legal rights to her daughter, if she is deemed fit by the doctors." "No," said Mrs. Abernathy firmly. "The girl has barely started to recover. She's bonded with us. She can't be ripped away from all this again." "I understand your concern," said the counselor, "but we have to consider what's best for the child in the long term. Her child has the right to be with her biological mother." The attorney spoke up. "There are legal precedents for situations like this. We can argue that the sudden change would be detrimental to the child's emotional well-being." "What about the mother?" asked the businessman. "Does she know we found the girl?" "Not yet," replied the counselor. "We wanted to talk to you first." "But she will have to be informed soon." The millionaire returned to his chair, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "How are we going to tell this to the girl?" "Very carefully," said the counselor. "Maybe we should consult the psychologist first." That afternoon, an emergency meeting was scheduled with the child psychologist. The doctor listened to the whole situation with professional attention, taking notes while processing the implications. "This is an extremely delicate situation," she said. "The girl genuinely believes her mother passed away. Discovering that this isn't true will be a huge shock. How should we approach this?" asked Mrs. Abernathy. "Gradually. First, we need to prepare the child for the possibility of changes. Then, introduce the idea that her mother may be alive. And finally, if it's inevitable, prepare for a possible reunion. What if the mother wants the girl back immediately? Asked Braxton. Then we'll have to fight it in court, replied the psychologist. But based on what I've observed, the child is in a stable and loving environment. Any drastic change could be devastating to her emotional development. That night, the businessman and the teacher returned home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The girl waited for them with a drawing she had made at the neighbor's house, the new yellow house with 3 happy figures in front. Her, Mrs. Abernathy, and Braxton. "Look what I drew," she said excitedly. "Our new family in the new house." The retired teacher hugged the child extra tightly, trying not to cry. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "When are we moving?" asked the girl. "Soon," replied the millionaire, his voice filled with an emotion he struggled to control. "Very soon." That night, after the child fell asleep, Braxton and Mrs. Abernathy talked late into the night about the impossible situation they were in. "I can't lose her," said Mrs. Abernathy, tears streaming down her face. "She's become my daughter in my heart." "Neither can I," replied Braxton. "But if the mother wants her daughter back, then we'll fight," said Mrs. Abernathy with determination. "We'll fight for the girl, for the family we've built. She deserves stability, not another traumatic upheaval in her life." It was a battle that neither of them had foreseen, but both knew they would do anything to protect the child who had changed their lives forever. All the businessman's net worth would be used, if necessary, to ensure that the girl maintained the emotional stability she had worked so hard to achieve. The week following the revelation about the mother was one of the most difficult that the millionaire and the teacher had ever faced. Both struggled to maintain a normal appearance in front of the girl, but the child, with her heightened sensitivity, sensed that something was different. "Grandma, why are you sad?" she asked one morning as Mrs. Abernathy tried to focus on preparing breakfast. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about some grown-up things," replied the retired teacher, forcing a smile. "Is it about our new house? Don't you want to move any more?" "Of course I do. We're going to be very happy in the new house." But internally, Mrs. Abernathy wondered if they would really go to the new house, or if the whole life they had built together was about to collapse. That afternoon, the psychologist paid a visit to begin gradually preparing the girl for possible changes. She sat with the child in the yard, where they usually had their most important conversations. "Sweetheart, do you remember your mommy?" asked the psychologist gently. "Of course I remember. She sang to me and made me beignets," replied the girl, her eyes sparkling with happy memories. "And do you remember when she left?" The child's face clouded over. "Auntie said she went to heaven because of me." "Sweetheart, sometimes adult people tell things that aren't true. Your mommy didn't leave because of you, and maybe she didn't go to heaven." The girl's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes, when people get very sad or sick, they need to go to special places where other people take care of them until they get better. Like the hospital where I went when Auntie hurt me?" "Similar to that, yes." The child was silent for a long time, processing this new and confusing information. "Is the doctor saying that my mum might be alive?" The psychologist took a deep breath. "It's a possibility, yes." Tears began to stream down the girl's face, not of sadness, but of a complex emotion that mixed hope, confusion, and fear. "But if she's alive, why didn't she come to get me? Why did she let Auntie hurt me?" "Because she was very sick, sweetheart. Sometimes, when people are mentally ill, they can't take care of themselves, let alone other people." That night, the girl barely managed to sleep. She ran to Mrs. Abernathy's room several times, full of questions that the retired teacher struggled to answer appropriately. "Grandma, if my mom is alive, will she want to take me away from you?" The question Mrs. Abernathy most feared had finally arrived. She hugged the child tightly, trying to convey a security that she herself did not feel. "We don't know yet, sweetheart, but what I can promise you is that we will always fight for what is best for you." "I don't want to leave," said the girl, her voice small but determined. "You are my family now." "And we always will be," promised Mrs. Abernathy, even though she didn't know if she could keep that promise. 2 days later, the attorney brought news that changed everything again. The mother had been informed about her daughter's situation and was insisting on seeing the child immediately. "Doctors say she is stable enough for a supervised visit," Irv explained during an urgent meeting. "Legally, we can't deny her that right. But the girl has barely begun to process the information that her mother may be alive," protested Braxton. "A meeting now would be too traumatic." "I agree," said the CPS counselor. "But the mother is threatening to take legal action if we don't allow the meeting, and unfortunately, she has legal rights over her daughter." The psychologist spoke up. "If the meeting is inevitable, then at least let's do it in the most controlled way possible. Neutral environment, limited duration, and with all of us present to support the child." It was decided that the meeting would take place in the psychologist's office the following Saturday. The mother would be brought from the clinic accompanied by a nurse and a psychiatrist, while the girl would have the support of Mrs. Abernathy, Braxton, and the counselor. During the days leading up to the meeting, the child oscillated between excitement and terror. Sometimes she drew figures of a woman she called Mommy. Sometimes she hid under the bed crying. "What if she doesn't like me anymore?" she asked one night. "What if she thinks I grew up ugly?" "Your mother will think you're the most beautiful child in the world," replied Braxton, even though he himself was terrified of the possibilities of that meeting. On Saturday morning, the girl woke up earlier than usual. She had chosen her prettiest dress, a yellow one, with flowers that Mrs. Abernathy had bought for her, and asked the retired teacher to make 2 braids in her hair. "I want to look pretty for Mommy," she said, looking in the mirror with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The psychologist's office had been specially prepared for the meeting. Toys and books were scattered around the room to create a more relaxed atmosphere, and chairs had been arranged so as not to intimidate either the mother or the daughter. When the mother arrived, the millionaire was shocked by her appearance. The woman he remembered as a cheerful and efficient employee had become a fragile figure, too thin, with grey hair and eyes that reflected years of suffering. But when she saw the girl, her expression changed completely. "My little girl," whispered the mother, tears streaming down her face. "My beautiful girl." The child hid behind Mrs. Abernathy, watching the woman who was her mother but who was also a stranger. The 4-year-old she remembered had grown up, changed, formed bonds with other people. "Hi, Mommy," said the girl timidly. "You've grown so much," said the mother, controlling the urge to run to hug her daughter. "You're so beautiful, so healthy." Gradually, with the careful mediation of the psychologist, mother and daughter began to talk. The mother said that she had been sick, that she thought of the child every day, that she deeply regretted leaving her daughter with the aunt. "I didn't know she was going to hurt you," said the mother, her voice broken by crying. "If I knew, I never would have." "It's okay, Mommy," said the girl, her childhood compassion speaking louder than any pain. "Now I'm safe with Grandma and Uncle Braxton." It was at that moment that the reality of the situation hit the mother. Her daughter had created a new family, people who clearly loved and cared for her. She looked at Mrs. Abernathy and Braxton, seeing the genuine love in their eyes when they looked at the child. "You took good care of her," said the mother, addressing them. "I can see that she is loved." "Very loved," confirmed Mrs. Abernathy, her voice choked with emotion. The meeting lasted 2 hours, enough time for mother and daughter to reconnect minimally, but not so long that it was overwhelming for either of them. When it was time for the mother to leave, she knelt in front of the child. "My dear, Mommy needs to go back to the place where she is healing, but I will think of you every day." "Are you going to get better?" asked the girl. I'm going to try very hard, and when I'm completely well, we'll talk about our future, okay?" The child nodded, hugging her mother for the first time in 5 years. It was a brief hug, still hesitant, but full of possibilities. After the mother left, the girl was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at Mrs. Abernathy and Braxton. "She seems sad," said the child, "but I still want to stay with you." That night, while the girl slept exhausted from the emotional encounter, the businessman and the retired teacher received a call that would change everything once again. It was the psychologist, with news about a conversation she had had with the mother after the meeting. "The mother has made a decision," said the psychologist. "A decision that you need to hear." All the capital accumulated by the millionaire through his business and investments would not be enough to buy that information. But he knew that the child's future depended on what the psychologist was about to reveal. The psychologist's call left Braxton and Mrs. Abernathy in suspense for an entire night. The doctor had asked to meet the next day for an important conversation about the mother's decision, but had not given details over the phone. On Sunday morning, the two headed to the office while the girl stayed once again with the dear neighbor. The child had woken up talking about the meeting with her mother, mixing joy at having seen her with relief at still being with her chosen family. "She's still sad," the girl had commented during breakfast, "but I think she wants to get better." In the office, the psychologist greeted them with a serious but not somber expression. There was something in her eyes that suggested the news would not be devastating. "The mother spent the night talking to me and the doctors at the clinic," she began. "The meeting with the girl was a turning point for her." "Turning point? How?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, squeezing her hands nervously. She realized that her daughter had built a new life, a family that truly loves her. And more importantly, she understood that forcing a change now would be harmful to the child. The millionaire leaned forward. "What exactly has she decided?" "The mother will not claim immediate custody of the girl," said the psychologist. "She recognizes that she is not yet completely healed and that the daughter needs stability." The relief that took over Mrs. Abernathy was so intense that she began to cry. The businessman held her hand, himself fighting against the emotion. "But there are conditions," continued the doctor. "The mother wants to maintain regular contact with her daughter while she continues her treatment. She also wants to participate in important decisions about the child's education and future." "That's fair," said the millionaire immediately. "She's the biological mother. She has that right." "And when she is completely healed?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, still worried about the future. "The mother was very clear about that," replied the psychologist. "She said that if one day she is completely well, she would like to have her daughter back. But not abruptly. It would be a gradual transition, only if it was best for the child." "And how did the girl react to this possibility?" asked the businessman. "We haven't talked to her about it yet. I thought it best to hear your opinion first." Mrs. Abernathy dried her tears. "The important thing is that she is safe with us for now, and if one day the mother is really well, we'll face that situation when it comes." "There's something else," said the psychologist. "The mother made a special request. She would like you to consider moving closer to the state capital to make visits easier." The millionaire and the retired teacher looked at each other. They had just bought the yellow house on the outskirts of the historic city, but if it meant keeping the girl and giving the mother a chance to gradually reconnect with her daughter. "We can consider it," said the businessman. "My company can open an office in the capital, and the retired teacher can work as an educational consultant anywhere." His investments in stocks and real estate funds gave him enough flexibility to make this change without compromising his financial stability. When they returned home, they found the girl playing in the yard with the neighbor, drawing more birds on a large sheet of paper. "Hi, Grandma! Hi, Uncle Braxton!" she shouted, running to hug them. "I drew Mommy together with you!" The drawing showed 4 figures now: the retired teacher, the millionaire, the girl, and a woman with long hair who represented the mother. All were smiling, surrounded by the inevitable colourful birds. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," said Mrs. Abernathy. "Did you enjoy seeing your mum yesterday?" "I did, but she was too thin. I think she needs to eat Grandma's sugar cookies to get strong." The child's innocence deeply touched the 2 adults. Even at 4 years old, she intuitively understood that her mother needed care. That afternoon, the psychologist came to have dinner with them. She had almost become part of the family in recent weeks. During the meal, she carefully explained to the girl that her mother would like to see her more often, but that she would continue to live with the retired teacher and the millionaire. "Can I see Mommy again?" asked the child, excited. "You can, yes. Maybe once a week, while she gets better. And will she like my drawings? I'm sure she will." 2 weeks later, a new routine was established. Every Saturday, the girl visited her mother at the clinic in the capital, always accompanied by Mrs. Abernathy or Braxton. The meetings were supervised initially, but gradually became more natural. The mother was visibly improving. She had gained weight, her hair was better cared for, and mainly there was a new light in her eyes. Seeing her daughter happy and safe seemed to be the best medicine for her recovery. "She's turning into a beautiful girl," said the mother to Mrs. Abernathy during one of those visits. "Thank you for taking such good care of her." "There's no need to thank me," replied the retired teacher. "The girl has become the daughter I never had." It was during one of these conversations that the mother made a revelation that surprised everyone. "There's something you need to know about the girl's father," she said, looking nervously at the millionaire. The businessman felt his heart racing. "What do you mean?" He worked at your company too. He was the engineer in the technical department," the millionaire remembered immediately. The man had been an excellent employee who had left the company around the same time as the child's mother, claiming to have received a better offer in another state. "He is the girl's father?" asked the businessman, still processing the information. "He is, but he doesn't know. When I found out I was pregnant, he had already left. I tried to contact him, but I never managed to. Why didn't you ever tell me this when you worked with me?" "Because I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of judgment, and when he left, well, I thought it best to raise the girl alone." This revelation brought a new dimension to the story. The child had a living father somewhere, a man who didn't even know of her existence. "Would you like us to try to find him?" asked the millionaire. The mother thought for a long moment. "Maybe. When I'm completely well, maybe it's time for the girl to meet her father, too." That night, back in the historic city, the businessman and the retired teacher talked about this new revelation while the child slept peacefully. "Our family can get even bigger," commented the retired teacher. "Are you afraid of that?" asked the millionaire. "A little," she admitted. "But if it's best for the girl, we'll face it together." It was then that the businessman made a decision that had been maturing for weeks. "Mrs. Abernathy, there's something I want to ask you." "What is it?" "Will you marry me?" The question took the teacher completely off guard. They had become life partners, united by the love they shared for the child, but marriage had never been discussed. It's not just for the girl," he hastened to explain. "Although she brought us closer, it's because I've discovered that you are the most generous, courageous, and loving person I've ever met, and I can't imagine my life without you." The retired teacher looked at this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed everything. He had gone from a distant neighbor to a partner, from a stranger to family. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I would marry you." The next morning, the girl woke up to find the 2 most important adults in her life with mysterious smiles on their faces. "We have a surprise for you," said the retired teacher. "Uncle Braxton and I are going to get married. That means he will officially be your daddy in our hearts." The child was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then her face lit up with the most radiant smile they had ever seen. "Are we going to be a real family?" she asked. "We already are," replied the millionaire, picking her up. "Now we're just going to make it official." All the wealth accumulated by the businessman through his business and cryptocurrency assets finally had the noblest purpose, to build a family based on true love. The months that followed brought a stability that none of the three had experienced before. The marriage of the millionaire and the retired teacher was a simple and intimate ceremony at the colonial church of the historic city, with the girl as a flower girl, wearing a pink dress that she had chosen personally. "Now, we are a real family on paper too," said the child during the party, holding the hands of the two adults who had become her parents in her heart. The move to the Yellow House finally happened, and the girl adapted to the new home with an ease that surprised even the psychologist. Her room was painted light blue, with drawings of birds on the walls. No longer the sad black birds she drew at the time of the aunt, but colorful and cheerful birds that represented her new life. The weekly visits to the mother became a natural part of the family routine. With each meeting, the child and her biological mother got to know each other a little better, gradually building a relationship that respected both the past and the present. Biological mommy. That's what the girl had started calling her to differentiate her from the retired teacher, who was simply, "Mommy, you are getting stronger," commented the child during a visit. "I really am, my dear, and it's because you give me the strength to get better," replied the mother, who had truly transformed. Her hair had returned to its natural shine, she had gained healthy weight, and mainly she had recovered the serenity that the millionaire remembered from when she worked for him. It was during one of these visits that the mother made an announcement that would once again change the family dynamic. "The doctor said I can be discharged from the clinic next month," she said, carefully watching everyone's reactions. "I'm going to live in an assisted living facility in the state capital, where I'll have independence but still psychological support when needed." The silence that followed was charged with complex emotions. The girl, now more mature, immediately understood the implications. "Does that mean you can come visit us at our house?" she asked. "It means exactly that," replied the mother with a smile. "If your parents agree, of course." "Of course we agree," said Braxton immediately. "You will always be welcome. And maybe," continued the mother hesitantly, "we can start talking about that subject we discussed before." Everyone knew she was referring to the child's father. In recent months, Irv had done some discreet investigations and discovered that the engineer was living in the metropolitan area, working as a civil engineer, and, according to the information collected, single and childless. "Are you sure you want to contact him?" asked Mrs. Abernathy. "I think the girl has the right to know her father," replied the mother, "but only if you agree. You are her parents now, and I respect that completely." The child, who listened to everything carefully, asked the question everyone expected. "If I meet my biological daddy, will you still be my parents?" "Forever," promised the millionaire, hugging her. "Nothing and no one can change that." 2 weeks later, an unusual meeting took place at the Yellow House. The engineer had accepted the invitation to meet the daughter he didn't know existed, and now he was sitting nervously in the living room, looking at the girl with a mixture of astonishment and emotion. "She has your eyes," commented the mother, who had been released from the clinic the day before and was making her first visit to her daughter's new home. The man, tall and dark-haired, 35, watched the child with fascination. "I can't believe I have a daughter," he murmured, "and that she's so beautiful and intelligent. Do you want to see my drawings, biological daddy?" asked the girl, naturally using the name she had decided to give him. "Of course I do," he replied, clearly touched. Over the next few hours, a new family dynamic began to form. The engineer showed genuine interest in getting to know the girl and being part of her life, but was also respectful of the role of the millionaire and the retired teacher. "You saved my daughter," he said to the couple, "and gave her something I could never have given, a stable and loving family. I am eternally grateful." "She saved us too," replied Mrs. Abernathy. "The girl taught us what unconditional love is." It was decided that the engineer would visit the child once a month and that they would gradually try to build a father-daughter relationship that complemented, not competed with, the bonds she had already formed. "Now I have 4 parents," joked the girl one night as Mrs. Abernathy put her to sleep. "Daddy in our hearts, Mommy in our hearts, biological Mommy and biological Daddy. And we all love you very much," replied Mrs. Abernathy, kissing the child's forehead. The following month, something extraordinary happened. The aunt, who had spent the last months in treatment for alcoholism, asked to meet the girl. The initial request was denied by all responsible adults, but the psychologist suggested that it might be therapeutic for both. "Not to rebuild bonds," she explained, "but so that the child can confront her past from a position of strength and security." The meeting was carefully organized, with all parents present and limited in duration. The aunt, visibly transformed by the treatment, apologized to the girl with tears in her eyes. "I was very sick," she said, "and I hurt you in ways that should never have happened. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret everything." The child, now more mature and safe, looked at the woman who had once been her source of terror. "Auntie, you hurt me a lot, but now I'm happy and safe." "I know, and I'm glad you found people who truly love you." The meeting was brief, but brought a sense of closure that helped the girl to move on completely. 6 months later, life in the Yellow House had found a perfect rhythm. The child attended the local school, where she was one of the most beloved students, always drawing colorful birds and telling about her large and loving family. The mother had moved to a small apartment in the state capital and worked part-time as a secretary, visiting her daughter every week. The engineer came from the metropolitan area once a month, always bringing carefully chosen gifts and stories about his work. "You know what impresses me most?" said the psychologist during one of her regular visits, watching the girl play in the garden. How she managed to integrate all these relationships without confusion or conflict. She simply accepted that she can have many people who love her. "Children are wiser than adults sometimes," commented the millionaire, watching his daughter in our hearts teach a song to the real birds that visited the yard. Mrs. Abernathy smiled, thinking about how her life had changed completely. From a lonely retired teacher, she had become a mother, a wife, and the center of an unconventional but deeply loving family. "Who would say that a 4-year-old girl who suffered in silence would change so many lives?" she commented. "Didn't just change our lives," replied Braxton. "She taught us that family isn't about blood or conventions. It's about love, protection, and choice." At that moment, the child ran up to them, holding a new drawing. A yellow house surrounded by colorful birds, with 6 figures holding hands in front. Her, Mrs. Abernathy, Braxton, the mother, the engineer, and, in a recent addition, the psychologist. "Look," she said proudly, "my complete family." And it really was. A family built not by chance or tradition, but by choice, love, and the determination of adults who decided that a child deserved all the happiness in the world. All the businessman's assets, his profits and earnings from financial investments had found their most valuable purpose: to sustain a family united by unconditional love, where a child who knew the deepest suffering had finally found the peace and security she always deserved. A year later, on the eve of the girl's 6th birthday, an unexpected discovery brought the perfect closure to a story that had begun with so much suffering. Mrs. Abernathy was organizing some old papers in the office when she found a dusty box that had belonged to the former owner of the Yellow House. "Honey, come see this," she called, carefully opening the box. Inside, there were old photographs of the house and a sealed letter dated 5 years ago. The letter was addressed to "Whoever takes care of this house after me," and was signed by a lady who had lived there before them. "Whoever finds this letter," read the millionaire aloud, should know that this house was built to house love and healing. For 50 years I raised here 4 children who were not born from my womb, but from my heart. Children who arrived hurt by life and left healed by love. This house has a special energy for that. If you are here, you are probably also taking care of someone who needs healing. The house will help you, as it has helped me during all these years. Mrs. Abernathy covered her mouth with her hands, touched. She also adopted hurt children. "And we didn't even know," murmured Braxton. "It's as if the house had chosen us." At that moment, the girl ran into the office, all dirty with dirt from the garden where she played with the birds that were now practically domesticated from so much she talked to them. "What are you looking at?" she asked, curious. "A letter from a lady who lived here before," explained Mrs. Abernathy. "She also took care of special children like you." "Like me? Children who needed a lot of love to get well," said the millionaire, hugging her. "Oh," said the girl naturally. "That's why I felt at home here from the first day." The simplicity of the child's response deeply touched the 2 adults. At 6 years old, she possessed wisdom and a capacity for forgiveness that continued to impress everyone around her. The next day, during the girl's birthday party, all the unconventional family was gathered in the garden of the yellow house. The mother had brought a homemade cake, the first time in years that she felt well enough to cook. The engineer had traveled especially from the metropolitan area, bringing a gift he had made personally, a birdhouse that he had built in his workshop. "For your bird friends," he said, installing the birdhouse in the child's favorite tree. The psychologist was there too, no longer as a therapist, but as a friend of the family that she had become. The CPS counselor had brought her little daughter to play with the girl, and even Irv was present with his wife. "I want to make a toast," said the millionaire, raising his glass of orange juice. "The child had insisted that everyone drink the same thing. To a special girl who taught us that family is not about perfection, but about unconditional love. And to all of you," said the mother, her voice firm and clear, "who saved my daughter when I couldn't do it." "We didn't save anyone," corrected Mrs. Abernathy. "The girl saved all of us. She showed us how to love without conditions, how to forgive without resentment, and how to build something beautiful from pain." The child, who was at the center of all this attention, smiled her radiant smile and made her own little toast with her kiddie cup. "I want to thank you," she said with her clear voice, "for having so many people who love me, and for having learned that even when bad things happen, good things can always appear afterward." At that moment, as if it had been arranged, a flock of mockingbirds landed in the tree where the new birdhouse was, singing a cheerful melody that sounded like a celebration. "Look!" exclaimed the girl. "Even the birds are singing happy birthday!" Later, when the guests had left and the child finally fell asleep exhausted but happy, the millionaire and the retired teacher sat on the porch of the yellow house, watching the stars over the historic city. "Can you believe it's only been 2 years since we heard her first cries?" asked the businessman. "Sometimes it seems like a lifetime," replied Mrs. Abernathy. "And sometimes it seems like it was yesterday. Do you have any regrets about how our lives have changed completely?" The retired teacher thought for a moment. "My only regret is not acting sooner. I imagine how many times she cried alone before we finally heard her." "But we heard," said the millionaire, "and that's what matters." That night, the girl woke up with a dream. Not a nightmare as she used to have in the early months, but a beautiful dream where she flew with the birds over an entire city full of yellow houses where children were loved and protected. She got out of bed and walked to her parents' room, finding them sleeping peacefully. For a moment she stood watching them, thinking about how they were different from all the other people who had taken care of her. Then she returned to her room and picked up her drawing notebook. In the light of the lamp, she drew her family once again. But this time, she included something new. In the drawing, all the figures had small wings, as if they were angels taking care of each other. And in the corner of the sheet, she wrote with her still childish handwriting, "My family who helped me fly." 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, the girl made a statement that perfectly summarized her journey of healing. "Mommy," she said to Mrs. Abernathy as she helped water the flowers in the garden, "I had a life before that was very sad, but now I have a life that is very happy. And I think the sad life made me know how to value the happy life more." Mrs. Abernathy stopped watering the plants and looked at that extraordinary girl who had transformed not only her life, but the lives of so many people. "You are very wise for a 6-year-old girl," she said. "It's because I went through difficult things," replied the child naturally. "But now I know I can go through anything, because I will always have you." At that moment, the millionaire arrived from work early, something that had become routine since the girl entered their lives, and found his 2 favorite women in the garden, surrounded by butterflies and birds, laughing at something the child had just said. It was a scene of perfect peace, an image that he would cherish forever. The family he hadn't planned, but that had become the most important thing in his existence. "What are you doing, my flowers?" he asked, using the affectionate nickname he had created for them. "Talking about how good it is to be happy," replied the girl, running to hug him. "And how good it is to have a real family," added Mrs. Abernathy. As the 3 hugged in the garden of the yellow house, the birds sang in the trees, the flowers swayed in the gentle breeze, and somewhere in the sky above the area, a story of suffering had definitively transformed into a story of love, redemption, and hope. The girl had flown away from the pain, but not alone. She had taken with her all those who chose to love her, and together they had discovered that even the most difficult beginnings can have the most beautiful endings. The child who once drew trapped and sad birds now drew free and colorful birds, and in that simple transformation of a child was contained all the magic of a family that chose each other, of a love that healed deep wounds, and of a hope that proved to be stronger than any pain. In the yellow house surrounded by flower gardens, an unconventional but deeply united family continued to write their love story, one happy day at a time. All the businessman's assets and wealth, accumulated through years of hard work and smart investments, had found its truest purpose: to sustain a family built on unconditional love, where a girl who knew the abyss of suffering had finally found her place in the world, surrounded by people who would love her forever. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving a score of 0 to 10, and thank you very much.